Yeah, lovely, So essentially, the one line message here is stakeholders of our health, of our personal health, is literally ourselves and our loved ones, friends and family, right? And oftentimes we get so busy with work, especially with work, and our kids, so on and so forth, that we deprioritize our own health, and then sometimes it gets a bit too late to actually recover, so on and so forth, and we head right into, especially as we grow older, we head right into some sort of ailment, and such, right? So the idea is to sort of reverse that and then see if we can dare to actually grow younger, right? So the agenda here is four things. Basically, insights from a few specialist physicians. I was fortunate enough to actually get hold of them on good health practices. That's one. Consequently, to look at monitors that are FDA certified, and we can get them in India as well anywhere else. And I actually got mine in Bangalore. And then the metrics or the biomarkers that the specialists actually have recommended, and then the ones that I actually use. And then deeply, deeply thankful to Microsoft for being able to give us these platforms that can help individuals. I mean, you don't have to look around and, you frankly, you don't need to know. It's good to know the ancient Indian language of Sanskrit, but you don't necessarily need to know, right? So using these platforms to actually help us manage and understand our health data effectively, and then monitor periodically, and then literally make it actionable, right? So deeply thankful. So I'll cover that. And then finally, obviously, how do you make it real, right? Diet and exercise, right? And this is a bit different. I mean, I've been doing dieting. I'm not dieting. I mean, I've been doing exercise, for a long time now. But what we'll walk through here is actually a little bit different, and it's made a massive impact on my life, at least. So let me also give you a little tiny bit about myself. So I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Sanjiv Venkatram. The fundamental one line over here, I'm just going to make this bigger. I have the video there because I need it for, scanning and so on and so forth. But my whole interest here is user delight, right? As an end user, I was in engineering before. I was in corporate finance and sales ops and so on and so forth. You look around with you and you don't have your personal IT sitting next to you, right? So there is a lot of, let us say, silent suffering that goes on. So my goal is literally user delight. It's more than just being able to use the tool. It's actually deriving happiness out of it, right? And so I'm a community member. I've been a community member since around 2018, 2017, around there. Once I was with Microsoft, once I got out, or let us say once I got kicked out, I basically said, hey, look, I really need to actually give back. And that's what I do. Okay. With this, and by the way, I do have, like everyone else, a YouTube channel, and then I do nowadays I didn't have one before. I was focused on LinkedIn primarily to bridge IT and end users and so on and so forth. But over the past, let us say 3 or 4 months, actually, every 10 days or 15 days, I kind of go up and actually put up a video and so on and so forth, mainly on Power Platform, aspects of, Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, so on and so forth. Okay, that's kind of my Power Apps is my first love now. Oh, did I say first love? Maybe not. It's deeply enamored by Power Apps. Let me just put it that way. Okay. So now, if I get back to the topic here, so how did I come upon this, right? Well, first of all, this January, I was in India. My father is 91, my mom's 84, and my dad's amazing genes, he's got no issues. But age catches up, and my mom said, hey, look, his platelet counts were actually fairly low. So my mom said, hey, go get a physician down the street. So I went over, and there was a gentleman doctor who does BP work. So he saw me, and promptly put a BP monitor on my arm. I said, hey, look, I need it for my dad, not for me. But then he actually put a BP monitor on my arm, and I was a bit stressed back then, obviously. So the lower level of the BP, you have the systolic and the diastolic. So the diastolic was actually 90. And he said, look, you have hypertension too. You need to take medication. And needless to say, I ran out of there. Then I said, you know what? I better start walking. I didn't want to run. I used to run quite a bit, like many years ago. So then I said, you know what, I don't want to hurt my knees. I'm fairly heavy right now. I was 93 kgs in January. So I said, let me start walking. So I started walking, and in about a few months, my weight started dropping. I also stopped eating like, my little kid. I have two kids. One is 11, another is 3.5. I'm 51, so no retirement for me. But anyway, so I used to eat the little ones, chocolates and cookies and all that. So I stopped doing that, started walking, and then the weight gradually started coming down. So by around March, mid-March, it was somewhere around like, let us say 87, 88 kgs. And I went over to my cardiologist and showed him. I started noting down my BP readings. And thanks to Microsoft and Power BI, so I had a little app, enter my BP readings from the machine, have my Power BI, and then I literally went over to him. I showed him, I'll show you all these things. So I showed him my BP, and he said, like, hey, look, the trend is okay. Just get a CT scan of your heart to make sure there is no calcium deposit or something. So that was clean. It was a zero calcium score, thank God. And he said, okay, go do whatever you have to do. Don't come back. You're like, absolutely fine. Right. So then I talked to my sister-in-law, who's actually in Orlando Health in Florida, and she basically said, "Hey, look, there are these couple physicians you might want to actually, talk to." And then that really, really opened my eyes, right? So that's the story as to how the transformation really took place. If I were to give you the punchline, I told you I'm 6'2", 51 years old. In January was 93 kgs. As of today, I'm actually 73, right? That's the bottom line. But that's just external, right? But if you actually look at internally, the metrics are absolutely wicked wild, right? They're absolutely amazing. So that's the story I would like to actually walk you through, right? So the first thing is, the specialist, right? So if I go over here, and by the way, this is Power Apps. This is not PowerPoint, right? I literally like present out of Power Apps nowadays. I've stopped PowerPoint. Maybe I should go back given Copilot and all that, but the Copilot doesn't seem, all compared to this, my excitement is still actually like here. Anyway, so the first person here is Dr. Robert Lustig. I came across him. My sister-in-law said Dr. Mark Hyman. I was listening to him, and he was actually doing an interview with Dr. Robert Lustig. So basically, he's a emeritus retired professor of pediatrics, division of endocrinology in the University of California, basically. And then he gives us guidance on metabolic health, like inside health, and how we can actually use our blood test and look at things like lipid panel to better our health, right? With the right diet and exercise. His key message is sugar is a killer, and really, I mean, he doubles down on that. And then he basically talks about watching insulin levels in the body as measured by this thing called as fasting insulin. Incidentally, you can actually get this done in any of the diagnostic centers in India, right? I've been getting it. I've been in India every month, month and a half. Every time I actually go there, I actually get my fasting insulin done. I've done it like, 3 or 4 times now. Okay. So I will share the video, his video with you folks. Please do listen. It can be a little technical, but then if you listen to it a few times, you get the message, right? And the message that he finally lands is fantastic. It's like, hey, be careful about ultra processed food and sugar. Okay. Then there's Dr. Mark Hyman. He has his own Institute of Functional Medicine, right? And then he particularly guides on lifestyle and environment and the genes and health. His key message as well is sugar is a killer. Ultra processed foods are terrible. Whole and real foods, and he also dares to say, hey, grow younger through lifestyle changes, right? And then it is not just about looking younger on the outside, that is a consequence. But then when you actually look inside, you truly actually like can see the difference between what you were and what you are. In fact, my metrics, if I were to analyze it right now, I'd probably be in the mid 30s or something like that, right? Very different from 51, right? And if I had kept going the way I was in January, I maybe in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, I would have issues, right? So many thanks to both these gentlemen. Then there is Dr. Jamna Das, Pradeep Jamna Das, amazing, amazing person. He's also in Florida. He basically has his own gig. He's a cardiovascular, physician, and he's a surgeon, does interventions, so on and so forth. And he basically guides on the link between diet, aging, and disease, right? And then his message again is sugar is a killer. You should listen to him. Amazing, amazing talk. And there are many excellent videos that he has actually done. And his key message again is sugar is a killer. And then he talks about fasting as a means to good health. And I've adopted, his message. And I every Friday I actually fast. In fact, I'm actually fasting. This morning I ate in at around 7:30, and then I'm just water through the day. And then, tomorrow morning I'm actually going to be eating, right? And as you can see, I'm not short on energy. I'm like a monkey, right? And I had a whole workshop, all day workshop. I was talking all through the day, so it doesn't tire me out, right? So amazing message from him. And diet is key to preventing cardiovascular disease that happens towards the end of bad diet, right? Then there is Dr. David Sinclair. He's actually a professor of genetics at the Harvard Medical School. He's not a physician, but he's a researcher. Some of the things that he has said, it has kind of, it's, how do you say, there have been people who have come up and said, be careful about what he says, so on and so forth. And to me, that's more on the side of the supplements and so on and so forth. But his key message is as well, diet can cause accelerated aging, right? I now have been to Bangalore many, many times. I've seen how poor food can be, especially outside. And then it was never the case when I was there. I left India in 94. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I mean, we didn't have any kind of cheese and so on and so forth. The max that we had was ghee, which is outstanding, actually. And then I observe it and I can see why it can actually cause accelerated aging, right? Then nutrition can reverse aging, right? It can reverse aging. And then one needs to pay attention, understand the biology of aging. So for me, it is like going back to grad school and then being a researcher all over again. So I listen to him, I look at the metrics, I play around with my own, I experiment with things, and then see what actually happens. Okay. So these people have been instrumental. There is yet another actually professor. I'll, how do you say, put that in the chat window later. And he talks about the importance of uric acid in the body and like what happens when the uric acid levels actually go up, right? So with their guidance now, let us talk about the metrics, right? So the metrics I track are fasting insulin, this thing called AAT, which is amino alanine transferase, triglycerides, which come off of your lipid panel. This is the cholesterol measurements. Basically, one of the key measurements in cholesterol is triglycerides. Then HDL, uric acid, and physically, I measure every day my belly to waist ratio. Okay, I'll walk you through. Then, obviously, the diastolic BP and the weight. So, fasting insulin basically is an indication of how much insulin is there in the body. I mean, we keep eating all the time, right? Munching all the time, especially in India. There are so many, amazing, amazing, like snacks. So we keep munching, and then some of it is like really sweet. I mean, you don't have to say it, right? There's a dizzying variety of sweets in India. So you eat in the morning, you keep eating, and then like you eat in the afternoon. The insulin, every time we eat, insulin actually spikes and it never comes down. We never give the body to recover and then the insulin to come down. When we are in our 30s and 40s, up until early 40s, it doesn't really manifest itself that hard. But then as you grow a little older into your late 40s, you will begin to notice, right? I mean, you climb a flight of stairs and then sometimes you do get out of breath, right? What is happening inside because of poor diet is this thing called insulin resistance. The body cells in the body can no longer respond to this, continuous, how do you say, stream of insulin actually coming in, right? So when you measure fasting insulin, if you go to any of these diagnostic centers, they'll ask you to eat at night, fast through the night, and in the morning you go, the guy comes in and draws blood. That should be less than 8. Okay. AAT, which indicates liver fat. You might have heard of fatty liver. You want zero fat in the liver, but then even a little bit of fat can actually cause a problem, right? And by the way, liver is the place where fat actually gets metabolized or digested or whatever and converted to energy that gets passed on to your mitochondria and etc. Right? So that should be less than 25. If you get a report today, the report actually says it should be less than 40. But that is latest news. But if you go back to the 70s and 80s, and that's what Dr. Lustig says, they used to have it less than 25. And for certain races, it needs to be below 20, right? So that's another thing to watch out for. Triglycerides are super important. So when you do your cholesterol, you get LDL, you get HDL, and triglycerides. Total cholesterol, they say, is kind of useless. It's a useless metric. It's just a mathematical summation, basically, of these three. But triglycerides need to be 150. Higher values of these are small, dense particles, and they basically get carried by LDL. So your LDL increases, and then they cannot be metabolized. They get released into the bloodstream, and they cause diabetes. I mean, like in people, and that is super important. Diabetes, one of the main causes is this increase in triglycerides, and ultimately it makes its way to the heart through the arteries and starts getting deposited as calcium and leads to heart disease, right? So if you listen to Dr. Jamna Das, he talks about how triglycerides, the mechanism through which it actually causes, the walls of the arteries to thicken and so on and so forth. HDL is on the other side, that should be high. So basically, if you look at the ratio of the triglycerides to HDL, it should be below 2.5 or ideally below 1.5, right? So HDL is good cholesterol, and through exercise and maybe a little bit of diet, you should be able to get that high. But triglycerides are super dependent on your diet. I mean, as you do good dieting, they'll drop dramatically, the triglycerides. Then there is uric acid, and that should be below 5. The reason, again, is it actually causes insulin resistance. And over a period of time, if you don't watch it, again, poor diet, so on and so forth, it can actually creep beyond 5 and then cause issues. The belly to waist ratio should be around zero point 0.8. And then it's an easy marker, like, without having to get tests, if you measure it, it's an easy marker for liver fat. And then what is called as visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that is inside between your organs. In fact, if you just try to grab your belly, if you cannot actually grab your skin, like, if you cannot, then that could be an indication of, liver fat. Your love handles on the side, if you try to grab it and, if it is just skin, you'll be able to grab it, but otherwise, that is visceral fat, okay? And then diastolic BP should be between 75 and 80. Anything over 80 is, 80 through 85, they say is hypertension 1, and greater than 85 is hypertension 2. But that is an offshoot of high triglycerides, high uric acid, so on and so forth. So the primary cause is your diet and lack of exercise that leads to, all of these, okay? And then weight, you just look at your BMI. All of this basically on the top lead to issues with weight, okay? So with this, what monitors do I actually use? I use this thing called HEM 7530. It's an Omron meter. You can actually find this anywhere in India. And then it's FDA approved, and you have an app, Omron Connect app, that actually gives you ECG, as well as you can actually get your BP. And then from there, you can, how do you say, automate it and get it to your email. And from email, using Power Automate, you can push it down to SharePoint pretty easily. But then for now, I just have it, I just upload this from my email to my app and so on and so forth. Okay. So Then there are reports, right? I'll show you the reports later. Let's keep going, right? So if I go over to my app that I have, this is actually built in Power Apps. I've got three components to this. One where you actually enter information about your BP and so on and so forth. The other one is where you can actually scan things like, vegetables and see what nutrients are there, so on and so forth. And the third one is where I actually upload my report. It automatically pulls the information and then it using Azure Document Intelligence, and then I also have ChatGPT included to see if there is anything in intel I can get on the metrics and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll walk you through these three. So the first one is basically so bare bones, right? I try to keep it as simple as possible. So as an example, today I had this workshop. I forgot to actually take in my readings today. But if you look at yesterday's readings over here, systolic 125 over 77, heart rate of 70, weight of 150, and my waist and belly diameter are fine. And then I actually basically record when I took my BP, which is very important for physicians. I say, look, I took this post half an hour after waking up. I had past bubble moments. You just got to be a bit careful because sometimes when you pass your bubble moments, your BP can go up, right? So you wait for a little bit and then actually take the readings, right? And to my dad, I actually take like temperature readings and all that. And then I have my ECG attached over here. So if I open this up, it basically goes away and right, it should, well, as usual, did I maybe, I might have actually maybe what I could do is I could edit this. I could edit this guy, right? And it's downloading it. Maybe I'll just do a new one and just attach it as an example to show you, right? And then if I go to my downloads, I should have one of these right here. Or I picked this one from yesterday, perhaps. And then if I open this, there is my ECG, right? So I have my ECGs basically saved every, historically, all my ECGs are over here, right? And then open it and you'll be able to see it, right? These are for physicians, right? And then Power Apps has this PDF reader, so it is fairly straightforward to actually have this attachment to be visible in your PDF reader, right? So if I just go over to the app and click on this guy, basically, I set a particular parameter, and if the parameter is 1, it pulls up my PDF reader, right? The PDF view is right here. And then if I go to view the visible property, it's basically PDF equals 1, right? The var PDF equals 1. It shows it makes this PDF reader visible, and then it shows whatever is actually attached here, okay? Then I basically can, once I update everything, I basically click on my Power BI. So what it does is it runs a, what do you call, Power Automate code and opens up my Power BI, and it literally shows you, I think it's already open here. I'm trying to show you the data model behind it, right? So this goes away, opens up my Power BI. And as you can see, in January, it was around 90, but right now it is around anywhere between 80 and 70, right? Just depending on the day, it hovers around there, good to go, right? Now, if I were to go over to the data model, it's dead simple, right? So simple. I store the data basically in a transaction table in Dataverse, and then I have my master date table and the master date bridge, and I can actually get, these month years over here, the horizontal axis and my BP. That's about it. And I've got a whole bunch of average, diastolic, and systolic measures here. Okay. So that's that. So now if I were to go back here and then scan this monitor, right? So what I'm going to do is I literally have my phone here and I'm going to go over to LinkedIn and then I'm going to make this a little bigger. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bigger and then I'm actually going to literally scan this beetroot over here. So I'm going to scan that and then I'm gonna say escape here and then go over to my phone. So you've seen that I've scanned my my beetroot there, sorry. And I'm gonna go over and literally, type in what vegetable is this, and then does it give us does it produce nitrous oxide in the body, right? In the body. Okay. So I'm gonna actually search this on ChatGPT. So this kind of goes away. So it basically is taking your image, right? Your base64 image, and then this text, and it runs it, and it should basically go away and give us, the end result, right? As to, um, right? So let us give it a try. It should come through by now. Oh, brilliant. There you go. Oh, I'm actually scanning this. I'm scanning this on my LinkedIn. So I suppose the image is not all that clear. So it says potato. But when I actually do it with a real beetroot in front of me, it goes away and actually says that if I play this here, it goes away and says, look, the vegetable is a beetroot. Beetroots are well known for their ability to produce nitric oxide, so on and so forth, right? So if I literally, unfortunately, I didn't bring a beetroot from the fridge. I should have got a real beetroot. I just thought I'll, make it simple by scanning this, and I paid for it. It goes away and scans it and says, hey, look, this is. So in Little India over here, I've actually scanned what is called as a coyote. It's basically a gourd, and then asked it, hey, what is there in this? I scanned what is called as jamun. I mean, I'm sure you guys know what a jamun is. I've scanned a jamun and then asked it what it is, right? So I use it like so. Wherever I go, if I find something new, scan it and see what nutrients it has, and if it's got good nutrients, then try to make it part of my diet, right? So that is this one. And basically, it is very simple. Essentially, what it does is there is a Power Automate flow that is connected to this ChatGPT. So I have a variable in which I actually get the output of this flow, and then I store it in this, and I display it. I display it in a text box over here. That's all I do, right? And then this var I type 3 basically makes that you saw on my app, you saw this guy, right, come up. So so essentially, when the variable is I type 3, it just shows you the box here. Otherwise, it doesn't. Okay, so that's all this is. And then I run a flow, and the flow is right there. So essentially, this flow runs an HTTP connector with a couple variables, and then it takes in the image over here, and then takes in the question, and then I just parse the JSON, pass it to the variable, and loop it through because it can have multiple things coming through, and then pass it into a variable, and finally, it responds back into Power Apps, right? I mean, would you do it in an enterprise like this? Perhaps not, but for me, it is ample good enough. I will obviously use Azure OpenAI. I did this when Azure OpenAI still hadn't got like for Omni. So, but now I would just use Azure OpenAI, right? And you could do many, many things. I mean, beyond just using how do you say flows and whatnot. But for what I do today, it is perfectly okay, right? For me, right? So let us get back. So now the third one is to actually scan my report, right? So I have a bare bones. I stole it off the form. So a typical form in Power Apps has an attachment. I just took it out over here, and this is nothing new. I'm sure all you guys have done this. So if I were to go ahead and then go to my blood report, right? I go here, my blood work, and I'll just scan one of these guys. So I click open, and then it goes away and basically shows me. So this place called Azure Diagnostics is very close to where I am in Bangalore. So I just get, they do my dad's blood report, so I do mine as well when I go there, right? So it gives me my blood work. It also gives me the lipid panel I was telling you. So it gives me cholesterol, total cholesterol, which is kind of meaningless. It gives me my triglycerides. This needs to be below 150, minus 78. Deeply thankful for it. My HDL is around 50. This can be higher. Ideally, I would like it to be around 70 or something like that. So I have a ratio of 1. Right now, it's around 1.5. I can live with that. My LDL is around 133, but I'm not too concerned because a good component of this 133, small component of this 133, which is this 15 units, actually come from triglycerides. The rest of the 115 units is actually large molecules of LDL, which, whoops, one second, folks, hang on. Can everybody actually hear me? Sorry, I just saw that I was actually on hold or something. Oh, that probably is on my some other person. Siddharth. Okay, no issues. Right. So it is 115 of this is actually large molecules that actually aid in immunity development. So I'm not concerned about LDL at all, and I'm actually pretty thrilled with this. And then if I go to my, AAT, which is your alanine aminotransferase, that is 25, pretty happy with that. Uric acid is 4. In fact, the latest one I have, I think, is somewhere like 3. So, pretty happy overall. And then the fasting insulin is 8, right? So now if I save and scan this, basically what happens is this gets saved to an Azure Blob store, ADLS actually, and then it gets picked up by a Python. Well, there is a Azure Python function that actually, first of all, picks it up from my Blob store. It then hands it off to the document intelligence in Azure that actually scans the report, and then it brings up all my metrics over here, right? So if I were to literally go over to, well, let me actually go up first here. And then this guy, save and scan, is actually a timer. So in this timer, basically, if I were to go to timer start, right on timer start, it goes away and it actually creates a file in the Azure Blob store in a container called blood reports, and then it stores it as a blood report.pdf file that keeps getting overwritten all the while, and then there is the attachment from here that it saves it, right? So it saves it. Then after the duration of around, like, I think 10 seconds or something like that, 5 seconds. Okay, after duration of 5 seconds, basically it runs the flow, right? It runs the flow, and then the output in var flow, basically I capture the hemoglobin that comes out, the RBC, platelets, so on and so forth, right? So if you quickly look at, let us say, the flow here, I'm getting those inputs basically from, just how do you say, a click from Power Apps. I run a custom connector here, and then I get the output of the custom connector. I basically parse JSON over here, for all the metrics, and I literally respond back here to Power Apps, right? So essentially, if I look now further and then go to the what do you call the Azure function, essentially it is a basic HTTP trigger, nothing spectacular over here, except that I'm actually going to the document analysis, how do you say, model. And from there, my field basically is hemoglobin, RBC, so on and so forth. And then I just loop through it and then get it right back, right? And I get it back as a JSON. And then if I were to go over to my Power Apps here, I basically have a custom connector here. It's an HTTPS connector. You guys probably have done multiple of these things. And then, I have my definition here where it actually is a parameter that, query parameter that basically brings all these things in. And then, I can go, here's my code, and I basically test it and so on and so forth, right? So once I have this, then I literally can use it inside. I don't use it in my app. I actually use it in my flow here, right? I run it in my flow. And then the document intelligence over here is part of Azure AI, the regular core AI. So it's in document intelligence here. And then you basically go in and then you can actually create your model. And once you create your model, you go to labeling, right? So you basically add data here, and then you can actually draw a region and then say, hey, look, this 15.1 is my hemoglobin, this red blood cell over here, so on and so forth. So you literally go through each one of these, and then that's about it. It actually, you train the model. So I've got about 3 or 4 reports that was good enough for it to get trained. See, I've got like a few reports over here, so that was good enough for it to, because I mean, I don't have 25 blood reports. I just started this in April. So, and I go to India every month and a half, 2 months. I'm not literally there every month, right? So I have about like 3 or 4 reports like this. So I use them to train this, and it's absolutely wonderful because it gives you a little bit more control than something like AI Builder. And I've got my Azure credits through the MVP program, so I can actually use this. So from your document scanner to your Azure function to custom connector to your flow, and then it goes back. I don't have an architecture diagram, sorry, but this is too simple. So document scanner to your, how do you say, function, from function to custom connector into your flow and into Power Apps, right? So that's the whole story here. Okay, so that's that, right? So from here, so I get this and I store this in my database. I'm not going to do this right now, but I have my data sitting in Dataverse and I just store it there, right? So now we get to, and I'm sorry, I think I'll take the questions towards the end. Let's go with the flow. And then if I now go over to diet and exercise, right? So essentially, you guys know dal. I mean, you have it every single day. Except what I do, and this might sound absolutely crazy and wild to you guys, is I basically put beetroot, carrot, radish, broccoli, cauliflower, and obviously tur dal and beans into my dal, right? So each one, so let us go through quickly. So beetroot basically gives you nitric oxide. It helps in produce, it has nitrates, it helps produce nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, basically, what it does is it's a vasodilator, meaning in your blood vessels, it actually dilates them, makes it like, bigger. So a blood flow is improved and it can lower pressure, right? So that's one thing. But it also helps you with the brain, the blood vessels across the board in your brain, the heart, the legs, so on and so forth. Across the board, it actually helps you dilate the blood vessels, right? So, to me, I would rather not consume beetroot juice. I would rather actually consume the whole beetroot because there are fibers in it, right? And fibers come in two kinds. There is soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Both are necessary for proper digestion and so on and so forth. It really helps your gut. And so I actually use beetroot, right? Carrot, as you know, beta carotene, right? Very good, basically. I mean, carrot, I don't think I need to say anything more. Good for vision, so on and so forth, right? Excellent source of vitamin K1, plays a good role in blood clotting and bone health, and so on and so forth, right? Radish is good in vitamin C, right? And then especially any damage that is caused due to oxidation in the body and release of free radicals, this can actually help you, right? So it basically plays a part in your reverse aging process. Broccoli is the same thing, vitamin C. Then you have cauliflower, which is, vitamin K, right? Essential for bone health, blood clotting. And then you know that tur dal is very basically protein, right? So I have these. Then and then of course, green peas as well, is protein. Then I have, once I eat this in the morning, I have a whole bunch of nuts, right? So for the nuts, I haven't brought this into my app, but in my Excel, I literally have how much of a quantity I need to have, right? So if I go up here, I literally said, you know what, I'll make my own, guide. So I do about roughly, between 10 and 20 grams of nuts in the morning. But, it depends on which nut it is. So pistachios are very good, high in vitamin B6, blood regulation, so on and so forth. So I have like about 16 of these. Cashews again, right? Also a source of like protein. Pecans, almonds, walnuts I wash out for because walnuts can actually carry a bit of like, fat and so on and so forth. So you need to be a bit careful. Hazelnuts are good basically in, vitamin E, magnesium. Magnesium is absolutely important for your heart. I have Brazil nuts, which is actually very high in selenium, supports thyroid function, so on and so forth. This is, you have one or two. This is a big nut. And then peanuts, right? And peanuts, sometimes I actually put them in a cooker and then, steam them and actually have this, right? So it kind of gives me how much saturated fat there is, how much monosaturated fat. This is okay. These two are okay. This is not so good, right? So this one needs to watch out for. And as you can see, walnuts actually have a fair bit of like, polyunsaturated fat. So I watch that. And then it gives me a little bit of fat, which is actually good for your brain. By the way, your brain loves fat. So, the right kind of fat is what I'm trying to say. If you have saturated fat like ghee, it is fantastic for your brain, right? Then this also gives me protein. Since I don't have meat, it actually gives me protein with the dal. That's good enough for me. I don't go to the field and do what do you call agriculture. So, for what I do, sitting on like, workshops and so on and so forth, absolutely fine, right? A tiny little bit of carbs because I don't eat any other carbs other than the nuts, right? So it gives me carbs and obviously gives me fiber, which is absolutely fantastic. And it gives me about 463 calories. So, if you do count calories, I mean, my metabolic, given my health where I am, I can actually eat up to 2,500 calories, right? I've increased my capacity to eat calories, right? So 463 is hardly a small percent of it. I don't care, Okay. So this is my nut schedule, if you will. I'm going to actually bring it into, this guy. Okay. And then when I cook this, essentially, when you do dal, you make tarka, right? So the tarka, basically, I don't use oil. I don't use sunflower oil, any of Dr. Jamnadas says, do not touch any of those oils because it actually has polyunsaturated fat. And that is deadly for heart, diabetes, and whatnot. So I actually use ghee, which it says has a higher melting point. So, use ghee. You obviously have some mustard seeds, you have some jeera. Then, and when I make the dal, obviously you have some haldi. So, put all these things together. The only thing is the dal looks red because of beetroots. I don't care, right? It has made a deep impact on my health. So I eat it at 7 o'clock. Then I eat my nuts right after. Then I don't have anything until 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, I actually have fruit. I have bananas, oranges, pear. I don't have grapes because grapes have a ton of sugar in them. And then I have oranges, right? So, and then like a kiwi, you scoop out the kiwi and have the kiwi. That is actually good for platelet count. And that's about it, right? And that I have at 1 o'clock, and I don't eat anything. I finish my work around like 6:30 or 7, and then I actually have the same exact thing what I had in the morning at that point in time. So that's been literally what I've eaten. But with the bit with this dal, I actually have upma, right, with carrot and beans. I experimented with millets, but then we used to feed millets to the horses and cattle before, so that always is in my mind. And then I need a little bit of carbs, so I'm okay with what do you call what is it called, upma, right? Now I tried quinoa, and you probably know quinoa as well. I've found that in India and many places. It's okay, but it didn't fill me, right? It didn't taste as good. So I said, you know what? If it's working, I'll just continue with upma, right? And I really don't get bored, right? I've enough in my life to keep me busy, so I don't get bored. I don't crave a pani puri, or I don't crave like, oh my God, I need like, in the Karnataka system where I'm from, the Mysore Pak, which is so nice, especially at the airport. If you buy, it's amazingly good. I don't crave it. So, I'm good with this. And I've been doing this since, I think, April now, ever since I came across Dr. Lustig. So I made my own thing. And man, did my weight drop. It dropped dramatically from 88 down to where I am today, right? And then, I've been around 160, 163 for about 2 months now, right? And I tell you, like, when I meet people, last time I went there, my school friend wanted to meet me. So they came by, he and my other friend came by. They almost didn't stop the car. They went past, and then I had to like kind of like, scream a little bit, and they stopped and said, like, I didn't even recognize you, right? I said, yeah, I look like a stick insect, and the whole reason is because of this eating. Exercise, basically, I walk right after my kid actually goes to bed. I walk about 10,000 steps. I listen to these professors. I listen to, some physics lecture. I listen to Nandeep when he's talking about his M365 Copilot plugins and so on and so forth. So I listen to different people, do my 10,000 steps. And while I'm doing this, I do about 15, 20 pull-ups. Every 1,000 steps I walk, I do about 5 pull-ups like that. And then I can do roughly about 60 push-ups, right? 20 push-ups each. So just use my body weight. I don't actually lift weights. I just use my body weight. So that has been my sort of ritual ever since, right? And then I intend to continue this forever, right? This is life. Maybe if I, and the good news is I actually have my own tiny, tiny little business. And as folks who do this kind of work, you don't have to have lots of I used to be with Microsoft, right? You have lots of people coming, hey, let's go for a drink, hey, let's go have this, none of that, right? Thank God my exercise and diet are my best friends right now, and my wife has left me alone. She doesn't bug me saying, hey, you're not eating this, you're not eating this. Literally, she sees what has happened, and so I'll keep going, right? So this is truly the story. Okay. With this, folks, I'll stop here. Let me see with the chat window if anybody has any questions.